Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the A segment of episode 72 of The Loud House, Jeers For Fears. We begin this segment at Royal Woods Elementary School, where we see Lincoln and Clyde overhearing Chandler talking to two of his friends. The characters talking to Chandler right now are Trent and a boy named Richie, according to the credits. Lincoln and Clyde inquire the trio about what it is that they're talking about, and Richie reveals that they're talking about the Royal Woods House of Terror, a haunted house attraction that recently opened up for this season. And the trio are looking forward to this haunted house attraction because they're now old enough to actually go to the Royal Woods House of Terror. Richie then pulls out a brochure for the Royal Woods House of Terror, and Richie starts to explain what one can expect at this haunted house attraction. But Chandler interrupts Richie and says that Richie shouldn't waste his breath telling Lincoln and Clyde about the Royal Woods House of Terror. Chandler is confident that Lincoln and Clyde won't go to the Royal Woods House of Terror because he considers Lincoln and Clyde to be the biggest chickens in their class, in his words. Lincoln takes issue with Chandler's insult and retorts that he and Clyde already acquired tickets for the Royal Woods House of Terror. Clyde is surprised to hear Lincoln make this claim, but he quickly goes along with Lincoln's claim, and Clyde claims that he forgot because of excitement rather than fear. Chandler then inquires Lincoln and Clyde about when they plan to go to the Royal Woods House of Terror. Lincoln responds that he and Clyde are going to go to this haunted house attraction tomorrow night. And Chandler responds by saying that he, Trent, and Richie will acquire tickets for tomorrow night too, so all five of them can go to the Royal Woods House of Terror together. After that, Chandler, Trent, and Richie leave, and once they leave, Lincoln and Clyde begin to panic, wondering how they're going to get through the Royal Woods House of Terror. But then Lincoln calms down once an idea occurs to him. Lincoln suggests to Clyde that they use the time to, Lincoln suggests to Clyde that they use this time before tomorrow night to prepare themselves for the Royal Woods House of Terror by toughening themselves up. And Lincoln says that he knows a certain group of people that can help them out. So the scene changes to a later point in time. We're at the Loud House now, and Lincoln and Clyde explained this situation to 9 of the 10 Loud sisters. Lori is the only Loud sister not present right now. So Lincoln and Clyde, after explaining the situation, Lincoln and Clyde inquire the present Loud sisters if they're on board with scaring the living daylights out of them, Lincoln and Clyde, to help prepare them for the Royal Woods House of Terror. And the present Loud sisters enthusiastically agree to this plan. Lisa then inquires Lucy about if Lucy has any suggestions. Lisa points out that Lucy is the Loud sibling that specializes in terror, and Lucy responds that she does have a few ideas in mind. So the scene changes to a later point in time. Lincoln and Clyde are in Lincoln's room right now. The door is closed, and they're waiting for the present Loud sisters to make the necessary preparations for this strategy to toughen them up. So eventually, Lincoln and Clyde hear Lucy's voice through the closed door, and Lucy says that they have made the necessary preparations. Lincoln and Clyde try to give each other a pep talk, but then they notice that the lights turn off. They notice this through the cracks underneath the closed door. And then through the crack underneath the door, they notice that red lights have now turned on in the hallway. Lincoln and Clyde are nervous about this, but they proceed to open the door. And sure enough, the second floor hallway of the Loud House does look rather intimidating, to say the least. So Lincoln and Clyde are nervous, but they continue to travel through the second floor hallway. Eventually, we, the viewers, see a giant cloaked figure appear behind Lincoln and Clyde. And the cloaked figure places a hand on Lincoln's shoulder and Clyde's shoulder. At first, Lincoln and Clyde think that the other is giving Yes, at first Lincoln and Clyde think that the other friend is giving them a pat on the back. That's what they think initially, an encouraging pat on the back. But then they realize that neither of them were responsible for this encouraging pat on the back. And when they turn around, they see the giant cloaked figure. And then the cloaked figure, at first the cloaked figure's face was hidden by the hood. But we now see that this cloaked figure is actually the present Loud sisters wearing a costume. This costume is big enough for 9 of the 10 Loud sisters to wear at the same time. So the present Loud sisters reveal their faces underneath the hood, and they shout boo, which works too well. Lincoln and Clyde are really scared out of their minds. So the scene changes to a little while later. Lincoln and Clyde are wrapped in blankets, and they're sitting on the couch on the first floor. And Lucy apologizes to Lincoln and Clyde. She admits that they overdid it with the scare tactics in one go. And Lincoln and Clyde assure Lucy that they know that Lucy had her heart in the right place. So Lucy says that she will make a point to tone down the scare tactics for the next strategy. So time passes by, and Lucy says that, time passes by, and Lincoln and Clyde let Lucy know that they're ready to try the next strategy. And Lucy says that before they begin, she wanted to let them know that she actually ordered a pizza for them to have before they begin this strategy. The doorbell rings, and Lucy is confident that this is for the pizza that she ordered. Lincoln and Clyde appreciate Lucy ordering them a pizza, and they're looking forward to it because pizza is not terrifying, it's delicious, or that's along the lines of what they say anyway. But when Lincoln and Clyde open the door, they see Lynn wearing a mask, and she's holding a chainsaw, and Lincoln and Clyde begin to panic. And Lynn and Lucy both admit that the scare tactics were still a bit too much. So Lucy agrees to tone down the scare tactics further. Or yes, Lucy says that she's going to have to tone down the scare tactics further. So next up, Lucy is leading Lincoln and Clyde to Lisa and Lily's room. Before they actually go into Lisa and Lily's room, Lucy inquires the boys to make sure that they're okay right now. Lincoln and Clyde assure Lucy that they're okay right now, so Lucy thinks that they're ready to begin the next strategy. So the door to Lisa and Lily's room open, and it's dark right now, but Lisa steps out into the light, Lisa steps into the light, and then a model skeleton pops out of nowhere, but this model skeleton popping out of nowhere still scares Lincoln and Clyde. So Lucy figures they're going to have to tone down the scare tactics even further. So a little while later, Lincoln, Clyde, and Lucy are standing in front of the doorway to the basement, and Lucy says that for this strategy, Lincoln and Clyde simply need to head down to the basement. Lincoln and Clyde are confident that they can handle this course of action, but they do acknowledge that the basement is rather dark right now. Nonetheless, Lincoln and Clyde do go down the stairs, but eventually they reach a squeaky step, and this causes Lincoln and Clyde to panic, and they run back up to the first floor. And so Lucy figures they're going to have to tone down the scare tactics even further. So the next scene happens a little while later. Lucy has guided Lincoln and Clyde to her, Lucy and Lynn's room, and Lucy says that for this strategy, all Lincoln and Clyde need to do is just open the coffin that's in Lynn and Lucy's room right now. And Lincoln and Clyde are confident that they can handle this one, since they note that the room is empty and the lights are on, and they're not the intimidating lights from earlier, they're just the normal lights. So Lincoln and Clyde are confident that they can handle this. So Lincoln and Clyde go into Lynn and Lucy's room, they open the coffin, and it's empty, besides maybe a pillow. And Lincoln and Clyde pat themselves on the back for a job well done. But then Lucy pops up behind them and congratulates them for accomplishing this objective, but Lucy popping up behind them the way she did startles Lincoln and Clyde, and they end up falling into the coffin. So the scene changes to Lincoln and Clyde back on the couch wrapped in blankets, and Lucy figures they're going to have to tone down the scare tactics even further. And then Lily enters the living room wearing wolf pajamas. Lily howls, and Lincoln and Clyde begin to panic yet again. And Lucy acknowledges that Lily picked the wrong time to try her new wolf pajamas. So after that, Lincoln and Clyde are wrapped in blankets again, and they're on the couch. And Lucy verbally says sigh. And then Lori and Bobby enter the Loud House. Lori and Bobby greet Lincoln, Clyde, and Lucy, but then they notice that Lincoln and Clyde seem to be in despair. And Lori notes that Lincoln is holding Bun Bun right now. Lincoln and Clyde explain to Lori and Bobby about how Lucy has been helping them prepare for the Royal Woods House of Terror, and they also acknowledge that they're going to the Royal Woods House of Terror so that some of their classmates won't think that they're cowardly. Bobby then reveals to Lincoln and Clyde that he actually was a staff member for the Royal Woods House of Terror some time ago in the past. And Bobby then says that he's going to check, Bobby offers to check and see if some of his friends who are also staff members for this haunted house attraction are still staff members. Bobby offers to give Lincoln and Clyde a tour of the Royal Woods House of Terror with the lights on and before the haunted house attraction formally opens for the night. Bobby is confident that this tour will put Lincoln and Clyde at ease and that they won't be so terrified of the haunted house attraction. And Lincoln and Clyde think this is a good idea, so they do agree to Bobby's offer. So time passes by. Lincoln, Clyde, and Bobby have arrived at the Royal Woods House of Terror. They also run into a squirrel, and they greet the squirrel before they actually enter the haunted house attraction itself. So the lights are on, like Bobby said, and this is before the attraction. Yes, this is before the haunted house attraction formally opens for the night. And once they enter, Bobby proceeds to show the various. Bobby proceeds to show the various elements of the haunted house attraction and reveals what they actually are. So Bobby lists off the practical effects and special effects for the haunted house attraction. These examples include spider webs that are actually just ordinary string nets, paper mache bats, and then there's food coloring that's made to look like blood. Styrofoam masks styrofoam masks and faces that imitate zombie heads, and toilet paper to imitate a mummy's bandages, and yogurt and fruit mixed together to resemble guts. So yes, after these examples happen, a scary clown suddenly appears, and Lincoln and Clyde begin to panic again. But Bobby assures Lincoln and Clyde that this scary clown is really just someone wearing a costume, and he actually figures out who is wearing the costume right now. The individual wearing the scary clown costume is actually Mrs. Bernardo, Bobby's drama teacher when he was still living in Royal Woods. And so Mrs. Bernardo removes the clown mask, and she greets Bobby, saying that it's nice to see Bobby again and wondering what brings him back to Royal Woods, in her words. Bobby reveals that he's giving Lincoln and Clyde a tour of the haunted house attraction. So Mrs. Bernardo greets Lincoln and Clyde, and Lincoln and Clyde greet Mrs. Bernardo back. So Bobby is preparing to take Lincoln and Clyde to another part of the haunted house attraction, and Mrs. Bernardo requests that Bobby Mrs. Bernardo requests that Bobby let Maria know that Mrs. Bernardo says hi. Mrs. Bernardo reveals that she and Maria, along with some other characters, actually played bingo together at some point in the past. So Bobby agrees to pass the message along to his mom, and then Bobby continues to give Lincoln and Clyde a tour of the Royal Woods House of Terror. Eventually, they run into a zombie, but Bobby reveals that this zombie is actually the crossing guard wearing a costume. Eventually, Bobby leads Lincoln and Clyde to a curtain. Bobby pulls the curtain back, and then we see that it's the bailout door. Bobby explains that the bailout door is a door that's present in most, if not all, haunted house attractions. And Bobby says that the bailout door is for anyone that wishes to leave the haunted house earlier because of the possibility of it being very scary. Lincoln and Clyde thank Bobby for the tour, and they say that they're confident that they won't be so scared once the haunted house attraction formally opens for the night. So Lincoln and Clyde then offer if Bobby would like a flippy. Lincoln and Clyde say that this is a thank you flippy to thank Bobby for the tour. Bobby does accept Lincoln and Clyde's offer, but he says he wants to talk to the person wearing the mutant costume. Bobby reveals that the person wearing the mutant costume was his coach for T-ball when he still lived in Royal Woods. So we then see a title card that says later that night, and sure enough, time passes by. So Lincoln and Clyde have returned to the Royal Woods House of Terror just before the event formally opens for the night. So Lincoln and Clyde greet the squirrel that they saw earlier, and then Lincoln and Clyde notice that the staff members of the haunted house attraction are leaving. Lincoln and Clyde inquire Mrs. Bernardo about why this is happening. Mrs. Bernardo reveals that management has fired the entire staff. Lincoln and Clyde don't understand why, and Mrs. Bernardo reveals that management found out about Lincoln and Clyde being given a tour of the haunted house attraction earlier in the day, and Mrs. Bernardo also reveals that management found out that Lincoln and Clyde didn't consider the Royal Woods House of Terror to be very scary, so they decided to revamp this haunted house attraction. Mrs. Bernardo says that she hears that it's 100 times scarier now, in her words. Lincoln and Clyde do feel guilty about unintentionally getting the staff members fired, but Mrs. Bernardo assures Lincoln and Clyde that there's no hard feelings. She says that this simply gives her more time to practice the one-woman show that she's been preparing. So Mrs. Bernardo cheerfully leaves, and Lincoln and Clyde begin to panic because the Royal Woods House of Terror is even scarier than it was originally going to be. Lincoln wonders if maybe they can leave before Chandler shows up, but that plan doesn't work. Chandler, Trent, and Richie do arrive, and Lincoln and Clyde figure they have no choice but to endure this even scarier version of the haunted house attraction. Chandler admits that he's surprised to see that Lincoln and Clyde have actually showed up. He was confident that they wouldn't show up. So the five boys head to the door to the inside of the haunted house attraction, and Chandler insists that Lincoln and Clyde go in first. So Lincoln and Clyde do enter first, and then Chandler, Trent, and Richie follow after. And so they're walking through the entrance of this haunted house attraction, and then eventually they find a fork in the hallway. And Chandler says that he, Trent, and Richie will go down one hallway, and encourages Lincoln and Clyde to go down the other hallway. And he then says that he'll see Lincoln and Clyde at the end of this haunted house attraction. So Lincoln and Clyde do go down one hallway while Chandler, Trent, and Richie go down the other hallway. Lincoln and Clyde are pretty nervous, and then eventually Lincoln and Clyde do see the scarier version of the Royal Woods House of Terror. Or yes, they see the full extent of the revamp of the Royal Woods House of Terror, and they begin to panic while rushing through the haunted house attraction. They really are scared out of their minds, and they're willing to actually find the bailout door. Eventually, though, we do see that someone has reached we see that a certain group has reached the bailout door, but not Lincoln and Clyde. No, this group is Chandler, Trent, and Richie. They went through the bailout door, and Chandler admits that this version of the Royal Woods House of Terror was the scariest experience in his life, in his words. So Chandler, Trent, and Richie, Chandler, Trent, and Richie are really scared out of their minds. And then we see the outside of the Royal Woods House of Terror, but we can hear Lincoln and Clyde screaming in panic. And the camera is showing different parts of the outside of the Royal Woods House of Terror. So we don't actually see what Lincoln and Clyde are seeing, but we still hear their screams of terror while they're traveling through the Royal Woods House of Terror. And eventually, they make it through the exit, not the bailout door, but the actual exit door, or the formal exit door, if you will. And although Lincoln and Clyde don't realize this initially, they thought they went through the bailout door, and then they see Chandler, Trent, and Richie. Lincoln wonders how the trio made it out of the haunted house attraction before them, Lincoln and Clyde. Chandler is about to come up with some excuse, but Trent actually decides to come clean and admit that they used the bailout door. Trent admits that they thought that the Trent admits that the trio consider the haunted house attraction to be too scary for them. And Richie, though, points out that Lincoln and Clyde actually went through the entire haunted house attraction. Lincoln and Clyde then look back at the door they went out of and they realize that they went through the exit door rather than the bailout door. And Lincoln and Clyde are patting themselves on the back with this realization, although they don't let Chandler and Trent and Richie know about this. Chandler fears that Lincoln and Clyde are going to reveal to the rest of their classmates that Chandler, Trent, and Richie are chickens. But Lincoln says that he and Clyde aren't going to do that. They don't think it would be very cool of them to do that, in Lincoln's words. And Chandler is surprised by this, but he acknowledges that he thinks Lincoln and Clyde are all right in his book. He even apologizes for mocking Lincoln and Clyde. And Lincoln and Clyde do accept the apology, and Chandler offers that they all go to Gus's Games and Grubs for pizza. So Lincoln and Clyde do agree to Chandler's offer, but when Chandler, Trent, and Richie get a bit of a head start, Lincoln and Clyde admit that they're surprised that they're now on friendly terms with Chandler. They never thought that would happen. Clyde then wonders if maybe they should acknowledge that they were trying to find the bailout door, but they decide, yeah, that's just going to be their secret. That's what they decide. So Lincoln and Clyde proceed to try and catch up with Chandler, Trent, and Richie, and then they see what looks like the squirrel from earlier wearing a crow costume. It looks like the squirrel is wearing a crow costume. You can see the squirrel's head inside of the crow mouth. And that's what Lincoln and Clyde think. They think that the squirrel is just wearing a crow costume. But then the squirrel's head falls out of the crow's mouth, and Lincoln and Clyde panic, and then they run for it. But then we find out that the squirrel head that fell off was just a fake squirrel head. The actual squirrel appears, and the squirrel and the crow high-five each other for scaring Lincoln and Clyde. And that is how we end this segment. So episode 72 of The Loud House is the season 3 episode that's dedicated to referencing Halloween. Or yes, episode 72 of The Loud House is The Loud House's 3rd season episode that pays tribute to the holiday of Halloween. It's not actually set on Halloween, or both the segments. Yes, the A segment and the B segment for episode 72 both have a Halloween theme to them, or they're Halloween-esque sort of entries, but they're not actually set on Halloween like how season 2 actually featured a Halloween episode, Tricked. But yes, you could say that season 3's Halloween-themed episode is similar to season 1's Halloween-themed episode, having an A segment and a B segment that both share the Halloween theme, even though they're not actually set on Halloween. So this was the A segment, and like I said, the B segment will also have a Halloween theme to it, even though it's not actually set on Halloween. But let's talk more a little bit about the specifics for this particular segment. Besides being a Halloween-themed entry, this segment stands out for being the formal or official return of Chandler, who last officially appeared. Chandler's last official appearance was in the season 1 segment, The Waiting Game. I say official because we did get to see Chandler have some kind of appearance in Season 2, the Season 2 segment Shell Shocked, but Chandler's appearance in that segment was part of a Daydream sequence, so the real Chandler didn't appear during Season 2. So this is Chandler's official return because this is the real Chandler rather than just a Daydream sequence version. And Chandler does have a slightly different look compared to Season 1, or at least his shirt is a different color. Yes, I believe Chandler wore a green shirt in his Season 1 appearance. Here he's wearing a yellow shirt. But yes, Chandler makes his return. And this segment stands out in particular because what happens at the end of this segment, Chandler is actually on friendlier terms with Lincoln and Clyde. Earlier in the segment, Chandler was sort of acting like a jerk to Lincoln and Clyde, calling them cowards and chickens and whatnot. But by the end of the segment, Chandler actually acknowledged that he considers Lincoln and Clyde to be braver than him after enduring the Royal Woods House of Terror. And Chandler actually does apologize to Lincoln and Clyde for acting like a jerk to them, and he actually appreciates that they're not going to tell their classmates about what a coward Chandler is, along with Trent and Richie. Now, some fans, though, have wondered, is this going to last? Some fans get the feeling that Chandler might not stay on friendly terms with Lincoln and Clyde, or at least they're not going to become best friends or anything like that, or join the inner circle. It just might be that maybe they're more like on relatively friendlier terms, or maybe Chandler will become a friendly rival to Lincoln, sort of like how I guess you could say how Goku and Vegeta kind of became friendly rivals after a certain point in time. That's an analogy that comes to mind off the top of my head that some people have wondered about Chandler. And yes, Chandler actually being on friendlier terms with Lincoln in this segment was interesting because I think I talked about it a little bit in the recap and thoughts for the waiting game, but in case I didn't, or if I didn't go into greater detail about it, I should go ahead and mention that throughout fan works, there are many fan works. Chandler is usually, among the fandom, you could say that Chandler has become the go-to antagonist for fan works. That's what I've seen some fans describe Chandler. But yes, there is a tendency for fan works to have Chandler be portrayed as the antagonist for that particular fan work. And surprisingly enough, I've actually noticed that some fans really seem to be annoyed at Chandler being the go-to antagonist for these fan works. I was surprised to find out that some fans actually took issue with Chandler, of all characters, being made into the usual antagonist for fan works. And the reason I find that curious, or why I'm surprised that some fans take issue with Chandler being made into an antagonist in fan works, is because before this segment aired, before the premiere of this segment, like I said, Chandler's only official appearance was in the waiting game. And yeah, Chandler wasn't really shown to be a particularly likable or even redeemable character during the waiting game. Now, in fairness, some fan works might have played up Chandler's antagonism a bit more compared to the waiting game, but at the same time, even with Chandler's antagonism being played up more in fan works, Chandler in the waiting game still wasn't particularly shown to be, Chandler in the waiting game wasn't shown to be particularly likable or redeemable, even when you take into account that that he gets made into an adaptational jerk in some fan works. And I was surprised, though, that, the fact that Chandler wasn't shown to be particularly likable or redeemable in the waiting game is actually why I'm surprised that some fans took issue with Chandler being made into an adaptational jerk in fan works, because at least with other characters that some fans exaggerate the negative qualities about, like the Loud family or Ronnie Ann, for example, in those cases, I feel it's more understandable why fans would take issue with the Loud family or Ronnie Ann having their antagonism played up in fan works, because throughout the show itself, those characters, like the Loud family and Ronnie Ann, were actually shown to have their good qualities and shown to have their kinder moments or their redeemable qualities, even if they didn't always make the best choices. Chandler, on the other hand, like I said before this segment, Chandler wasn't shown to be particularly likable or redeemable during the waiting game. I've seen some fans make the argument that Chandler did keep his word about giving Lincoln and Clyde invitations to his birthday party, but other fans say that it kind of the gesture is kind of ruined because Chandler kind of strung Lincoln and Clyde along for a while before he actually gave them the invitations. And Chandler's actions did end up causing problems for Lori in the long run. Thankfully, Lincoln was able to, thankfully though, Lincoln was able to take Lori's Lincoln was able to make things right with Lori by taking Lori's place working at Gus's Game and Grub so that Lori could go to the dance that she wanted to go to. So, Chandler, though, didn't really pay the consequences for the part he played in that segment's conflict. So that's why some fans think of Chandler being not particularly redeemable or likable. It's like, yeah, he kept his word to give them the invitations, but it's kind of ruined by the fact that he strung them along for a while and he got away with his part in the problem of that segment. So that's why I personally never really had a problem with Chandler being made out to be more of an antagonist in fan works, because unlike the Loud family members and Ronnie Ann, who actually were shown to have good qualities even if they didn't always make the best choices, Chandler, before this segment, wasn't really shown to have any redeemable qualities or likable qualities. So that's why I do find it strange when I see fans get upset about Chandler being made out to be an antagonist. My reaction is along the lines of, really, of all the characters in the show that get their antagonism played up more in fan works, Chandler is the figurative hill you're going to take your last stand on. Not the Loud family, not Ronnie Ann, not other characters who have actually been shown to have their good qualities, even if they made some bad choices. Yeah, I know some fans call it a cliche to make Chandler be the antagonist of a fan work, but I have acknowledged before cliche is a pet peeve word for me. I consider cliche to be a lazy buzzword that gets thrown around to dismiss an idea just because of how many times it's done and doesn't really bother to look at if an idea is well executed or not. And yeah, so I never really had a problem with Chandler being made out to be an antagonist in fan works if it's well executed. And I can understand the logic behind having Chandler be an antagonist in fan works. Chandler and the bratty kid from Serial Offender, Lincoln or Wilkes, are the names that fans have given the character since his actual name hasn't been given yet. But yeah, Chandler and the bratty kid from Serial Offender are really the closest the show has to antagonists that are in Lincoln's age group. Hank and Hawk seem like they're a little older than Lincoln's age group, and some of the other antagonists were adults like Lord Tetherby or Doug and Michelle, for example. But yeah, considering that Chandler and the bratty kid are the closest the show has to antagonists in Lincoln's age group, I never really had much of a problem with Chandler being made into the go-to antagonist of fan works. And while I'm on the topic of Chandler, I should actually bring up that some time ago, at least as of the recording of this video, there was a chapter book for the Loud House that was released to the public, and Chandler does appear in this chapter book. I haven't had the chance to read it for myself, but from what I was able to gather from the information I was able to gather about it, it sounds like that Clyde and Chandler actually compete in a school election. That's what I heard anyway. I'll have to read the chapter book for myself to learn more about the specifics. But I do hear that, from what I understand, this chapter book does show Clyde and Chandler competing in a school election, and they actually do reference this segment, Jeers For Fears. And that chapter book actually reveals Chandler's last name. His last name is McCann, for anyone who's curious. So Chandler McCann is his full name. So yeah, that chapter book does give me the impression, that chapter book does help to give me the impression that Chandler might still fill the antagonist role in later entries, but maybe he'll be more like a friendly rival rather than an outright antagonist. But I guess we'll see in the future. To my knowledge, I don't believe Chandler returns in later entries of Season 3. From what I recall, I'll have to refresh my memory when I rewatch the later entries of Season 3 for those entries' recap and thoughts videos. But from what I recall, I don't think Chandler gets another appearance in season 3, but maybe we'll see more of him in season 4 and season 5, and maybe we'll get to see more of Chandler's character from there. And so, yeah, Chandler was probably the big part of this segment, or the most notable element of this. Yes, Chandler's return and him being on friendlier terms with Lincoln and Clyde was the most notable element of this segment. But there are still some other elements to talk about for this segment, like how most of the Loud sisters were helping to toughen Lincoln and Clyde up. Some fans definitely, or I would say this is a good example of showing Lincoln being on better terms with his sisters, because, like I've mentioned before, the Loud sisters do have a bit of a notorious reputation with some fans. But I think this segment in particular helps to show the Loud sisters in a better light, because Lincoln and Clyde did request that that the Loud sisters scare the daylights out of them to help them out with preparations for the Royal Woods House of Terror. And Lucy did apologize to Lincoln and Clyde for going a little overboard with the scare tactics. Or Lucy did apologize to Lincoln and Clyde for going too far with the scare tactics at once. And she did agree to tone down the scare tactics for their sake. And she did make sure that they were okay before they continued. So I think this was a good example of showing the Loud sisters in a better light for some fans, because they were shown to be well-meaning, good-intentioned. Lincoln and Clyde did request their help, and Lincoln and Clyde did acknowledge that they had their hearts in the right place, even if they might have gone a little overboard at first, although Lincoln and Clyde still ended up being scared by some of the toned-down versions. And I guess that would be probably one of the flaws for this segment. Lincoln and Clyde did seem to be a bit on the jumpier side than usual. Or, yeah, I can see where some fans are coming from, thinking that Lincoln and Clyde seemed a little too easily scared in this segment. Like, certain scenes, fans could understand why Lincoln and Clyde would be scared out of their minds. But other scenes, some fans thought it seemed a little bizarre that Lincoln and Clyde seemed to be really scared of, or really jumpy about other scenes. So, yeah, I can understand where some fans are coming from. Maybe they did make Lincoln and Clyde seem a little too jumpy for certain moments in this segment. But otherwise, I think the idea, at least, the idea of the Loud sisters helping them out and having good intentions, and actually trying to be considerate about toning down the scare tactics for Lincoln and Clyde's sake, I do think that was heartwarming. I think those were heartwarming moments. And it was also heartwarming how Bobby offered to give Lincoln and Clyde a tour of the haunted house attraction before it formally opened. I thought that was really heartwarming. That shows how Bobby does, that kind of continues how Bobby is considered a figurative older brother to Lincoln, which happened towards the end of season 1. And it was nice to see Bobby and Clyde on friendly terms with each other, considering Clyde was jealous of, considering how Clyde has a crush on Lori, and Clyde has been shown to be jealous of Bobby dating Lori. So seeing Clyde and Bobby being on friendly terms with each other was really heartwarming in light of that. And like I said, it was heartwarming to see Lincoln and Bobby show more interactions with each other, since they do consider each other to be figurative brothers. And that's right. The scene where the staff members for the haunted house attraction got fired, that was also pretty heartwarming too, because Lincoln and Clyde did feel guilty that they accidentally got them fired, but Mrs. Bernardo at least assured them that they don't take it out on Lincoln and Clyde personally, or they have nothing against Lincoln and Clyde for doing that. Mrs. Bernardo seemed to understand that wasn't their intention, and she did look on the positive side by saying it gives her more time to practice her one-woman show. And I believe we do see Mrs. Bernardo again later on. Mrs. Bernardo will return again in some later entries, so we will get to see more of her. That's right, Bobby did mention that he was a student of Mrs. Bernardo's when he still attended Royal Woods High School. So that's a little hint I'll give for those unfamiliar with what's to come later in Season 3, but we will see Mrs. Bernardo in an entry that's dedicated to Royal Woods High School. We'll cross that bridge when we eventually get to it. But bottom line was, yeah, I thought it was pretty heartwarming how Lincoln and Clyde did feel bad that they accidentally got the staff members fired, but the staff members, at least Mrs. Bernardo, didn't take it personally or didn't hold any ill will towards Lincoln and Clyde about it. So I thought that was pretty heartwarming too. So yeah, I think this segment overall did have some good elements to it. I think overall this was an enjoyable segment. I think they did well with the Halloween theme to this segment. And like I said, this segment did have some heartwarming moments, whether it was Lincoln and Clyde feeling bad for the staff members and the staff members assuring Lincoln and Clyde that they don't hold it against them, and Bobby giving Lincoln and Clyde a tour to help them out, and the rest of the Loud sisters helping Lincoln and Clyde out too, and feeling bad when they went overboard with the scare tactics and being mindful to tone down the scare tactics. While I also thought it was nice that Lincoln and Clyde acknowledged that their hearts were in the right place. And like I said, it was pretty cool to see Chandler make a return again after a while. And while I'm sure some fans are hoping that Chandler being on friendlier terms with Lincoln and Clyde will stop FanWorks from portraying him in a bad light, like I said, I never really had a problem with Chandler being an antagonist in FanWorks, since he and Lincoln, or Wilkes, or Bratty Kid from Serial Offender were really the only antagonists in Lincoln's age group, or the closest the show has to antagonists in Lincoln's age group. And at least that chapter's book seems to suggest that Chandler might still be a bit of an antagonist to Lincoln and Clyde. Maybe more of a friendly rival than an outright jerk to them. But I guess we'll just have to see, depending on if Chandler returns later on in Season 4 and Season 5. And like I said, probably the main thing I would consider a weakness for this segment was I do agree with some fans that Lincoln and Clyde seem to be a little too jumpy or a little too easily scared about certain things, though I could understand why they were scared about certain things. But that's really just more the minor issue. Otherwise, I think this was a pretty enjoyable Halloween-themed segment overall. So I think the pros outweighed the cons for this particular segment. So otherwise, there we go for this segment. So as of this video, we've now discussed the A segment for episode 72 of The Loud House on this channel. Take care, and until next time,